Okay, the other kind of organization like this, I'll just make it quick, are the people who are broadcasting into North Korea. And in order to broadcast into North Korea, they have to know what's going on in North Korea, so they have to develop their own news sources inside North Korea. Amazingly, Radio Free Asia is one of those. In the last year or two, I've noticed quite a lot of scoops by Radio Free Asia, which is U.S. government funded. It's an NGO, but it's U.S. government funded in Washington. And they've got some people inside who are telling them what's going on. This is absolutely wonderful. They got off to a very slow start, but they're doing fantastic stuff. So, I don't want to talk too long. I'm just saying this is revolutionary. It's revolutionary not only for our business, it's revolutionary for North Korea that people have the guts to do this. And he will tell you something about how much guts it takes to do this. It's very, very dangerous work. But the people who have the guts to do that, right now they don't have any kind of a unified front. They're not rising up against the government. It's just individuals who are chipping away by telling the truth about the regime. But that's a really great start. I mean, if you were looking for the beginning of an end to tyranny in North Korea, this is where you would start looking. These people who actually are willing to do this day in and day out, contacting these outside news organizations, sending them news which checks out, at least his organization's news checks out, Daily NK's news checks out, some of the others not quite as well. It depends. If you watch them, you'll find out which ones do. But the guts, it's just amazing that they're willing to do this, and it shows that it's not a happy camp over there. Discontent is rising. But I've talked long enough, and I better turn it over to Ishimaru-san.
Thank you, Bradley. Ishimaru-san, どうぞ。
皆さんようこそお越しいただきましてありがとうございます。アジアプレスの石丸です。
Thank you very much for coming, ladies and gentlemen. And I've just been introduced. I'm Ishimaru of the Asia Free Press.
私はアジアプレスというフリーランスのジャーナリストネットワークに所属をしております。
I belong to a network of freelance journalists who work for AsiaPress.
メンバーは30人ほどおりまして15人が日本人で残りの15人はアジアのメンバーで日本では東京と大阪に事務所を持っています。
Our network consists of about 30 journalists, 15 are Japanese and 15 are representatives from other Asian nations. We have offices in Tokyo and Osaka.
で私自身はその、朝鮮半島の問題を、かれこれ25年ほど関わってきましてジャーナリストとしても、北朝鮮取材を17年やってきました。
I have been very concerned about the North Korean issue for the past 25 years. I have been actively covering North Korean affairs for the past 17 years as a journalist.
今日北朝鮮のお話をするんですけど、まず最初にちょっと皆さんにお伺いしたいんですが、この中で北朝鮮に行ったことがある方、ちょっと手を挙げていただけませんか。
I'm going to talk about North Korea today, but before I do that, I would like to ask, could I have a show of hands? How many of you here have actually visited North Korea?
特派員の皆さんですからもうちょっと多いかと思いましたけど、4、5人っていうところですよね。ここにおられるお二人はもうスペシャリストですけれども、北朝鮮っていうのはご存知の通りなかなか入るのが難しい。どうぞ。
I thought there would be more hands raised because so many of you are foreign correspondents. I think there are about 4 or 5 of you. My point was that although the two of us here are specialists in regard to North Korea, for the average person or even an average journalist, it is very, very difficult to enter the country of North Korea.
で入ったとしても取材が非常に難しい国です。
And even if you are fortunate enough to be able to enter the country, it's very, very difficult to cover news, to do reporting.
私も95年、97年、98年に3回入国取材をしてきました。
I visited, as a journalist, North Korea 3 times in 1995, 1997, and 1998.
95年は観光客に紛れて平壌とその周辺を回ってきました。
In 1995, I managed to sort of blend in with a group of tourists, and I visited Pyongyang and some surrounding areas.
97年は中国人の友人のパスポートを借りて写真を貼り替えて、2日間だけですけど行ってきました。
In 1997, I borrowed the passport of a Chinese friend of mine. I removed his photograph and put my photograph on top, and I spent only 2 days there in North Korea.
そして98年はハムギョン北道という一番北の地域に3週間余り滞在する機会がありました。
I was able in 1998 to spend 3 weeks in the northern part of North Korea in a place called
ハムギョン北道。
Hangyongpukto.
でその時は食料支援の、監視役を、仰せつかって地方都市に長く滞在できるという非常に珍しいチャンスがありました。
This was a very, very unusual opportunity, I believe, for journalists under the pretense that I was monitoring the distribution of food that had been sent as aid by other countries. I was able to visit some regional cities.
私が行ったこの3回っていうのは実は北朝鮮で最もたくさんの餓死者が出てた時期なんですね。
I would also like to point out that this period, 1995 to 1988, when I had 3 opportunities to visit North Korea, was a very, very difficult time for the country. It was a time when many, many people were dying of famine, of starvation.
95年平壌に行った時は私その当時は知りませんでしたけれども、すでに地方ではもう大量の餓死者が出始めてた時です。
When I visited for the first time in 1995 and I was visiting Pyongyang, at that time I had not been aware of it. Later I learned that already at that time many people in the outlying areas, in the local or regional areas, were beginning to starve to death.
しかしながらこの平壌にいた5日間ほどの間でですね、食料不足の兆候は全く分かりませんでした。
What was rather extraordinary was that although people were starving out in the regional areas, during the 5 days that I spent in Pyongyang, I had absolutely no indication, I received no hint that there was any kind of food shortage.
で、平壌に行った時、いろいろ見たいところをリクエスト出しましたけれど、我々ジャーナリストは行きたいところには行けない、見たいところは見られないわけですね。
When I was in Pyongyang, I put out requests saying that I wanted to see this and I wanted to visit this place, etc. However, the truth about being a journalist in North Korea is that you can't see you can't see what you want to see. You can't go where you want to go.
そして行きたくないところと見たくないところばっかり連れて行かれるという。
On the other hand, you are taken to places that you don't want to see, and you're taken to places that you don't want to go to.
そして97年、98年、これはもう国際社会に食料支援を求めた後ですけれども、
The second 2 visits in 1997, 1988 were when North Korea had already acknowledged that it was suffering from food shortages and had requested aid from other nations and international food organizations.
実際にガリガリに痩せた人、それから本当にさまよっているコッチェビと呼ばれるホームレスをたくさん見ました。
And at that time, I did have opportunities to meet many, many quite emaciated people, and also people who were just wandering, what we call basically homeless people.
しかしながら死者、餓死している人っていうのは目撃はできませんでした。
However, I did not have an opportunity to actually see anyone who had actually starved to death, no corpses.
私の知る限り外国人のジャーナリストで北朝鮮の中でですね、餓死者を目撃したっていう人はおそらく一人もいないと思います。
To the best of my knowledge, I've never actually heard of any foreign correspondents from any nation actually seeing the body of a person who had starved to death.
つまり私が申し上げたいのは、私たち外国のジャーナリストがいくら努力してもいくら頑張っても北朝鮮の核心には近づけないっていうことなんですね。
What I'm trying to say is that no matter how hard we try, no matter how hard we try, we foreign journalists are limited in what we can do. In other words, we cannot get to the very heart, to the very essence of what North Korea is.
あまりにも高い壁があってそれを超えることは私たち外国人のジャーナリストは無理だという結論に達しました。
I have been covering North Korea for many, many years, but I must acknowledge that there is a tremendously high wall that is facing all of us, and no matter how much we endeavor, we cannot ever scale or cross that wall.
私たちそのジャーナリストの仕事の基本というのはやはり問題のある場所にできる限り近づくこと、確信に近づくことだと思っています。
Of course, the job of a journalist is, as far as is realistically possible, to try to get to as close to the actual event. If something is happening, to get as close to that thing as possible.
それで私の取った手法というのは、中国と北朝鮮の国境に通って、北朝鮮から出てきた人にとにかくたくさん会うということでした。
So, what I decided to do in being faced with all these obstacles was I decided to spend as much time as I could along the Chinese-North Korean border and to try to speak directly with as many people who had come over from North Korea as I possibly could.
これまで17年間に現地に、ボーダーに、70数回通ってきて、ざっと700人ぐらいの、北朝鮮の人にインタビューしてきました。
Over the past 17 years, I have visited the border between China and North Korea over 70 times, and over these 17 years, I have probably interviewed on a one-to-one basis, over 700 people.
それはその難民として逃げてきた人もいれば、渡ってきてまた帰る人、それから合法で出てきた人が混じっています。
And when I talk about these 700 people who were from North Korea, some of them were, of course, refugees who had escaped. Some of them were simply people who were coming to China for a while and then intended to go back. Some were actually people who had all their papers in order. They had come to China legitimately.
でこのような手法を取っててもやっぱり限界なんですよね。その川を越えて自由には取材ができないわけですから。
In spite of this, however, I felt that there was a limit as to how much I could actually cover and understand North Korea, because although I could speak with the people who had come over from North Korea, I myself could not cross the river and go into the country.
でそれでもうこの高い壁を越えるための方法は結局北朝鮮の中の人と一緒に取材をすることしかないというのが私の結論なんです。
And so, realizing that there was this insurmountably high wall in front of me, I realized in the end that the only way that I could really possibly get information directly from North Korea was somehow to get the cooperation from people who were still within the country, inside the country, and work with them.
それで北朝鮮の中の人とに、ジャーナリストになってもらって自分の国のことを自分たちで記録する、伝えるという仕事を、してもらえるようなパートナーを作るということを2003年ぐらいからやってきました。
So from about 2003, I have embarked on this new endeavor, which is to try to find potential partners in North Korea. These would be people that I would help try to train to become journalists. In other words, to try to have them record what they are seeing and feeling in North Korea, and to also communicate what they are seeing and feeling and hearing in North Korea to other people.
それではまずですね、私のパートナーの3人、うちの3人をちょっとビデオで紹介をしたいと思います。15分ほどありますが、このビデオを見ていただきながらちょっとまずご紹介をしたいと思います。
So I'm going to show you now, introduce to you 3 partners in North Korea that I work with, and it's about a 15-minute video that I'm going to show you, and I think I'm going to make some comments as you watch the video.